The studio lights rose slowly, painting the entire stage in a soft golden glow. It was the kind of light that made everything look larger than life, every movement sharper, every breath heavier, every moment stretched into eternity. As Mira and Eli stepped
Please
forward,
subscribe
the
to our
vast,
channel.
echoing space around them felt unreal, as though they had stepped into a world that didn't belong to them. The floor beneath their feet pulsed faintly with hidden lights, guiding their path toward the center of the stage, where millions of eyes, both in the room and across the world, waited for something they didn't yet know. Mira held her brother's trembling hand, her touch gentle yet firm. She could feel the uneven rhythm of his breath, the racing of his heart, the invisible fear that wrapped itself around him like a second skin. She tried to steady her own breathing, but the enormity of the moment pressed heavily on her chest. The stage felt endless, but the silence felt even bigger. It stretched around them
Please
like a living
subscribe
thing,
to our channel.
watching, listening, anticipating. The judges sat somewhere beyond the lights, but their presence felt immense, an unspoken force waiting to shape the siblings' fate. The crowd, thousand strong, seemed to merge into a single wall of energy. It rose from the seats like a tide, surrounding the siblings with a mixture of curiosity and expectation. People shifted forward, leaning in, sensing that something delicate and powerful was about to unfold. Eli's steps were small, almost unsure, but Mira walked half a pace ahead, letting her quiet strength guide him. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Every shared memory, every long night, every whispered prayer lived in the space between their hands. Her love had carried him through storms before, she only hoped it would carry him through this one too. When they reached the center, a hush fell deeper than before. Even the lights seemed to pause, holding their breath as they waited. For a moment, the siblings stood completely still, two small silhouettes wrapped in shadows and dreams. Their hearts beat in unison, their breaths sinking as though the universe itself had prepared them for this beautiful, terrifying moment. And then, as the world leaned forward, waiting, everything fell into perfect, absolute silence. Long before the bright lights of the AGT stage ever touched their faces, Mira and Eli's world had been shaped by simpler, quieter things. Their life in Manila unfolded inside a cramped apartment tucked between rusted rooftops and narrow streets where the sun hit hard and hope often felt too small to hold. The days moved with a familiar rhythm, the hum of tricycles, the distant call of vendors, the soft echo of children playing in alleyways. Yet inside their tiny home, life carried a heaviness that never seemed to fade. Their mother's absence was a silence no one knew how to fill. Her framed photo hung on the wall, a quiet reminder of the warmth they once had. For Mira, that picture became the symbol of everything she needed to protect. She wasn't just an older sister, she grew into someone far older than her years, stepping into responsibilities she never asked for but accepted with a steady heart. She prepared meals before school, studied while stirring pots, and watched over Eli during long nights when his breathing turned uneven. Eli tried to be strong, but the world had not always been gentle with him. His health had been fragile since childhood, each illness leaving marks on his small body and on their small family's budget. There were days when he couldn't run like other kids, nights when he couldn't sleep from the pain, mornings when the weight of weakness made him feel far older than his age. But every time he felt himself slipping, Mira was there, her hand on his back, her presence an anchor in the storm. Their father, Raul, lived between exhaustion and determination. His jeepney shift stretched long into the night, the rattling wheels carrying the weight of his children's future. He worked with a quiet desperation that only a parent could understand. But no matter how hard he pushed, life always found ways to test them, rent overdue, medical bills rising, dreams shrinking. Yet even in those hardest moments, there was one thing that refused to fade: music. In the dim corners of their home, wrapped in shadows and evening warmth, Mira and Eli found melodies that soothed the ache. Singing became their small rebellion against a world that demanded too much. It became the heartbeat of their home, the bond that kept them moving, the hope they carried when everything else felt uncertain. And though they didn't know it yet, those quiet, fragile moments were preparing them for something far bigger than the life they lived, something waiting on a distant stage, under blinding lights, where their past would become the reason the world stopped to listen. Eli's voice had never been just a talent, it was a miracle stitched together through years of struggle. When he was little, his health had been so fragile that even breathing felt like a challenge on some days. Doctors spoke in careful tones, offering a future filled with limitations. They warned that his lungs might never fully strengthen, that strain could take away what little voice he had. For most children, these warnings would have simply meant fewer playground games or quieter afternoons. For Eli, they meant something deeper, an uncertain future in the one thing that brought his heart alive. But every time life pressed him down, something inside him pushed back. It was small at first, like a flicker of light in a long hallway. He would hum while drawing, softly at first, afraid the sound might vanish. Mira would hear him from the other room, her heart lifting with each fragile note. She never interrupted, she simply listened, letting him find himself slowly, carefully, in those moments when he believed no one was watching. As he grew, the hums became melodies. The melodies became small songs. And the small songs became the quiet heartbeat of their home. The sound wasn't perfect, sometimes shaky, sometimes unsteady, but there was something in it that felt deeper than technique. It was the voice of a boy who had survived more than his small frame ever showed. Mira nurtured it with the tenderness of someone guarding something priceless. She spent evenings finding songs for him to practice, helping him breathe slowly, guiding him without pushing too hard. She knew the risks. She knew the warnings. But she also knew that taking away his music would mean taking away a part of him that had kept him alive through years of weakness. Their father often returned late at night to hear Eli practicing softly in the living room. Those fragile notes became his comfort after a long day on the road. They became reminders that even in hardship, beauty could still bloom. Yet he also worried, each high note, each long breath, felt like a test Eli's body wasn't always ready to handle. Still, the boy kept singing. Not because he dreamed of stages or audiences, but because it was the only place where his spirit felt unbroken. Every breath of music he released became a quiet triumph against every limitation placed upon him. No one could have imagined that the same voice once thought too weak to survive, would someday rise powerful enough to make an entire world stop breathing. Back on the AGT stage, the siblings stood beneath a single, soft spotlight. It washed over them like moonlight, gentle yet exposing every fear they carried. The silence in the theater was almost unreal, thousands of people waiting, listening, watching two young Filipino siblings who looked too small for a stage this large, too fragile to hold such heavy expectations. Mira closed her eyes for a brief moment, grounding herself in the memory of home, the sound of their mother's laughter, the smell of breakfast cooking on a small stove, the echo of Eli's earliest songs drifting through their tiny living room. She let those memories fill her chest, steadying the storm inside her. When she opened her eyes again, she wasn't just a nervous teenager on a foreign stage. She was someone carrying her family's entire journey in her heartbeat. Beside her, Eli inhaled slowly, his breath tight but determined. Every note he would attempt tonight pushed him beyond the limits doctors once warned him about. But he had come too far to let fear reclaim him now. He felt the stage beneath his feet, the warmth of Myra's presence beside him, the weight of every moment that had led them here. His voice, fragile, miraculous, born of struggle, wrapped itself around his courage as he prepared to release the first sound. And then it began. Their voices rose together, soft at first, weaving through the stillness like threads of light. The harmonies carried the tenderness of their bond, two souls shaped by loss, yet held together by hope. The first verse washed over the audience like a quiet prayer, gentle and unexpected, drawing them deeper into the siblings' world. But it was Eli's moment that changed everything. When the music swelled, he stepped into a part of the song meant for the strongest voices. A note that demanded power, breath, and fearlessness. The kind of note he had been told his body could never sustain. He reached for it anyway. The sound that emerged was not just strong, it was haunting, pure, impossibly controlled. It rose through the theater like a surge of emotion, lifting every heart with it. The crowd froze. Judges leaned forward. No one moved. No one breathed. It was the kind of moment that rewrote everything, the kind where a boy once too weak to run suddenly soared higher than anyone believed he could. And standing beside him, Myra's eyes filled with quiet, trembling pride. For in that single, impossible note, Eli had broken every limitation that once defined him. When Eli's final note faded into the vastness of the theater, the silence that followed felt unreal, like the entire world had paused on a single breath. It hung in the air, delicate and trembling, as though even the walls themselves needed a moment to understand what had just happened. Mira and Eli stood frozen at the center of the stage, their bodies still shaped by the emotion of the song, their chests rising and falling with the weight of everything they'd poured into that performance. Then, something extraordinary happened. The silence broke, not with noise, but with emotion. A wave of breath swept through the audience as people finally exhaled, many with trembling hands covering their mouths, others wiping tears that had fallen without their permission. The siblings couldn't see individual faces clearly through the lights, but they could feel it. The shift. The warmth. The awe. It washed over them like a tide, soft yet overwhelming. The judges rose from their seats, one by one, creating a ripple of movement that transformed the entire theater. Their expressions carried something deeper than surprise. It was the kind of look reserved for moments that could not be explained, only felt. Moments where raw humanity touched something holy. Moments where talent and heart collided in a way that left the world changed. On stage, Eli's legs trembled. His hands shook at his sides. The note he had released still echoed inside his chest, but now it shared space with something new, relief, disbelief, and a quiet, powerful pride. He turned slightly, his eyes searching for Myra's presence. She stood beside him, tears shimmering on her lashes, her shoulders rising with a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. The warmth of the lights reflected off her expression, revealing a joy so pure it almost hurt. Together, they stepped forward, unsure but guided by instinct, as applause thundered through the room. It grew louder with each passing second, an eruption of sound so powerful it seemed to shake the air itself. People rose to their feet, some clapping, some crying, some simply staring as if they had witnessed something impossible. For the first time in their lives, Mira and Eli felt the world looking at them not with pity, but with admiration. Not with concern, but with wonder. In that moment, under the brightest lights they had ever known, the siblings realized something they had never dared to believe. Their story wasn't just theirs anymore. It now belonged to everyone who had just witnessed a miracle.